So a very warm welcome to Jane Bennett. I'm really excited to be talking to her today. I first came across you with your book, The Pill, and then later on I trained to be a celebration day for girls facilitator. And I know there's so much work that you do around this area, so I'm really looking forward to diving in and hearing a lot more about what you do. So welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Tessa. It's really delightful to be here with you today.
So first of all, I'd like just to know, where are you in the world?
I live in central Victoria in Australia, so it's down south on the eastern side, and I live on acres, so in the country, and right now I'm looking out my window and I can see a rabbit, and most days I can see kangaroos, and we've got lots of birds at the moment because it's spring here, so they're all going kind of crazy making nests.
That makes me slightly jealous because, of course, here we're going into autumn, and although I love the colours of the trees, it is feeling very rainy and grey today. All right, and also I wanted to ask, what is your heritage?
What is my heritage? Well, both my parents' families have been in Australia for several generations, and I do have one ancestor, or a couple actually, a husband and wife that came out very early as convicts to Australia. They were both forgers. So I guess it takes some skill to be a forger, but other than that, I don't know anything about them. But they were all of them from various parts of the United Kingdom. So I have, Scottish and people from Cornwall and people from, just trying to think of the different areas, Yorkshire, and a little bit of French and Netherlands and Dutch. So
brilliant. So I love to sort of have a bit of context. And I'd love to know a little bit about what you were like as a girl, around the age of 10 years old.
I have to think about that because it's so much easier to be aware of what other people are like. At 10, I was the youngest of 4 children, so I had 2 older sisters, and they were 5 and 8 years older than me. So I was always looking to them, wanting to be like them and more like them. So I was very much wanting to grow up and be able to do what they were doing, and they were my heroes, really. And so other than that, I love to make craft. I was always making things. School was fine, neither here nor there. And I loved basketball. I wasn't very good at it, but I did love it. And sometimes I went to school early so I could just practice shooting the basketball through the hoop.
So from early days, your creativity was already there with your crafting. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved craft. Yeah.
I think birth order is really interesting because a while ago in the Red Tent, we were talking about birth order, and we sat all the eldest children together and all the youngest children together and the middle children together and the only children. And the discussion that came out was really fascinating because all the eldest children did sort of have a very similar personality, and same for the youngest. And interestingly, in the Red Tent that particular evening, all the eldest children had married youngest siblings, and all the youngest one had married oldest siblings. And I don't know that that was always true, but I think it's sort of showing that there's a balance needed that you get from somebody else.
Yes, I've read that that's quite common, and that's actually the same for my husband and I. He's an eldest child.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're proving my theory there.
Yeah,
because I think very often we sort of feel like we have a lot of agency, but there's all sorts of factors that feed in, aren't there, that are outside of our control and shape how our life goes. Yeah, I find that
absolutely, and it does help. Sorry, it does help to be aware of it, doesn't it? If you know that, you can kind of observe it and see where it's working for you and where it doesn't work for you, and then decide how you want to be.
Yeah. So when you were sort of, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, did you have any idea of where you might go in your life in terms of work? Was there any particular passions that you had?
I really didn't at that age. When I was younger, I had the usual, I had a time where I wanted to be a ballerina and a time I wanted to be an astronaut and, those kind of things. But around sort of 10 to 12, I really, I was just at school. I really wasn't thinking about those things. I did, at the time when I was at school and when I was 14, we did have career guidance. And seriously, in those days for girls, it makes me sound incredibly ancient, but in those days for girls, it was pretty much teaching, nursing, or social work. Yeah. There was really very rarely would they recommend anything else. So I don't know. All the quizzes we did always ended up with one of those.
So as you got older, did you have a plan of what you would do next?
I left school. I finished school and I left quite early. So I was 17, just 17 when I went to university. And I really didn't know then. I was kind of interested in anthropology. I liked the idea of studying different cultures. And I went to a university in Melbourne that was the only one offering anthropology at that time. And that then evolved into, I thought it would be more practical to do a social work degree. So I did the anthropology, but then I went on to complete a social work degree. So I was always very interested in working with people and developing community and helping work with the strengths of people into a sort of a positive outcome for them individually and for a community.
I love those connections because I actually studied social anthropology at university. Yeah, it's that fascination with why do some other people do things differently than I am familiar with in my family and my community. Yeah, oh, amazing. So,
yeah.
So a little bit about what you do now and how you got from doing the anthropology and the social work to all the amazing things that you've given to the world so far.
Yes, well, I think that's for me my story and how I evolved into what I do now. And I call myself a menstrual educator, and I'm also an author. I've written a number of books, and I create resources. And when I was at school or when I was at university, I would never have imagined that. It wasn't a career choice. It wasn't something that was even available. And I guess for me, it really began in my mid-20s. I learned methods of what they call fertility awareness, which is learning to read signs of fertility in my body and to use that for the purpose of conception or contraception. And when I learned that, those methods, I felt like a veil of awareness just dropped. Suddenly, I could read my body in such a straightforward way. It was almost something that I felt at the time I really should have, would have been great to have had this understanding really, quite some years before, soon after actually starting to have a period, to learn what these changes were, how I could understand them for myself. Yeah. And at that time, I wouldn't have needed it for contraception, but more about more to know, oh, I'm ovulating now and this is why I feel like this, or I'm in the week before my period now and I'm feeling a little more tired and I'm having a headache. Maybe I need to have certain foods or not have certain foods, or go to bed earlier, and look after myself differently, because at the different stages of the cycle, there's different ways of caring for ourselves and looking after ourselves. And that was so valuable when I learned that. So at the time when I learned it, I just thought, oh, everybody needs to know this. I got really passionate about it, and I started working with the woman who taught me. And we spent sort of quite some years teaching health professionals for natural fertility management, we call it. And that then evolved into working with mothers and daughters, because as I worked with women, helping them understand their cycles, they said, well, this is fantastic for us, but what about our girls? You know, how do we help our girls have this understanding and have this experience? So for the last 20 years, that has been my main focus, working with mothers and daughters and helping mothers feel really confident and really able to support their girls, and helping girls come into their years of having a menstrual cycle, you know, really proud of their bodies and understanding their bodies and feeling they can talk to other people and get the support they need and share with their friends and share with their teachers and their parents and their health professionals what's going on. And so that's been incredibly rewarding work. And the world is changing. There are, you know, many more people doing this kind of work now, and it's really fantastic to see the changes.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you thought the momentum was increasing, because that's kind of my route into it as well, is that I'd started learning about cycle awareness and really attracted to the idea of going to a red tent. And when I couldn't find a women's circle near me, I decided to create my own. And it was really through going to that and attending workshops and retreats with lots of other women that I started to hear people, you know, find out about cycle awareness and then say, but I wish I had this information 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And so I came to the same conclusion, you know, wouldn't it be great to take it to the girls? And that's when I found that you were doing the celebration days for girls facilitation. And I just thought, that's perfect. And I think, you know, in the media, there are more and more articles coming out in magazines. There was an article in The Guardian about the menopause a couple of weekends ago, you know, and it seems to be around a lot more. But yeah, you feel like there's a sort of shift, there's a tide change almost.
I think so. I think we've also got a long way to go. There are many people still, you know, in roles that are working with women and girls, maybe like teachers and health professionals. Who else? Yeah, other people in different roles who work with women and girls, who really, through absolutely no fault of their own, but just haven't come across a more positive way of working with their own cycle or understanding their own cycle, and also supporting girls and women in a positive way. And now it doesn't mean, by being positive, it doesn't mean that sometimes women or girls might have pain or they might have difficulties, but we need to look at the cycle and look at menstruation as it's a very healthy, natural, positive process. And if someone's having problems, what do we need to do to be active about that, to understand how to support ourselves, and when we need expert help to deal with those things. So it's not the cycle itself that is the problem. It's actually just a health issue that needs dealing with.
Yeah, because you mentioned how for yourself, when you discovered the fertility awareness, that it sounded like it changed your relationship to your body, and you suddenly, it almost sounded like a roadmap. You sort of knew what was happening through the cycle. And so I think for me, the excitement is that it's not just talking about the cycle, but it has a knock-on impact to body sovereignty and, you know, self-esteem and body image and all those sorts of things.
Absolutely. I felt, you know, it was empowering. I felt like it was really important knowledge, a really important understanding to have as a woman, you know, and it was ultimately, you know, so easy to understand it once I learnt, you know, what the process was, to know where I was in my cycle, to know what was happening in my body. And even though the menstrual cycle repeats and is similar, every cycle is a bit different too. So I was able to read it better to know, oh, you know, I'm having more symptoms this month. I also know how to look after myself. I know what I need to improve my health. And the menstrual cycle is an incredible window into our body and into our health that empowers us to look after ourselves. And that just, you know, takes some learning, but it's really the invitation of someone saying, yeah, you can do this. This is your right, your power as a woman, to be able to care for yourself in this way.
And for me, that's the critical thing, is the self-care. It's sort of, when you practice cycle awareness, there is a sort of invitation there to really step up your self-care. And when mums do that, they're modelling it for their daughters. So sometimes I find that if mums are a little bit reluctant and they can't see how they're going to fit it into their lifestyle and busy family work balance, I say, but just think, yes, you are doing it for yourself, but you are also modelling it for your daughters. And that normally does the trick, because they think, oh yeah, I can actually pass on a very different blueprint for my daughter. That's really exciting.
Absolutely. It's one way I look at it as well. It's the difference between having an attitude that I'm the victim of my body, of my hormones, of my menstrual cycle, and I'm just a passive victim here, and these things happen to me, which is one attitude that people have. And many people have learnt this from their parents or their ancestors or their teachers. You know, it's quite a common approach. And the other approach is being an active agent, is being, you know, really involved and seeing that, oh, I can make choices here, and I can, if I don't understand what's happening, I can find it out, and I can find ways to look after myself, and feeling really entitled to that, and feeling like we can give ourselves permission for that, which sounds strange, but we have had thousands of years of perhaps not feeling that and being judged for what is a totally natural process.
I love that. Yeah, being an active part of taking control. Yeah, it's lovely. So you made it sound quite easy, that you were you discovered the fertility awareness, and then you've gone on to writing a book. And were there ever times when you had a lot of pushback about the topic that you'd chosen to be passionate about?
Sort of. If I focused on it, I would say probably yes. But I always expected that to be there. So if I learned to focus on where people were interested and wanted either workshops or wanted information or wanted conversation or support, and I'd far rather put my energy where people are interested in and wanting that. And sometimes that would be moms, that would be, you know, at workshops with girls and mothers. It might be fathers, it might be employers in workplaces. You know, it can really come from anywhere. And I just really haven't focused on the other. If people, there wasn't even just a little opening, it's like, that's fine, you're not ready, I'll move on. But plenty to do.
I'm glad you mentioned the dads then, because you also do workshops for daughters and dads, don't you?
Just fathers, actually.
Oh,
so
right.
We have a 2.5 hour, not that, I mean, a workshop with fathers and daughters would be great. And I could see a lot of value in that. I just haven't created it. But I have run for many years a workshop, just 2.5 hours with fathers, to help them understand their role as their daughters are changing, and which can be quite a different role to mums. And of course, there are family differences as well, but how valuable for girls and how important it is for them to stay close and to understand the cycle and the process of the cycle. Because for most men, they have grown up with very little real information about periods and the menstrual cycle. and very often treated as, say, if they were expressing curiosity as children or as teenagers, they were very often sort of treated like, well, you don't need to know this, you know, this is not important. So they may pick up some information from girlfriends or a wife or colleagues or friends, but pretty patchy. So being really supported to understand the menstrual cycle, to understand what either their daughters or their partners might be experiencing, and how they can support them, and the value of their support is, you know, it's been a really, it's always a really wonderful workshop to run, and I really appreciate working with dads who are keen. And often many men have expressed that they've learnt more in that bit of time than their whole life, and feel empowered to be able to be supportive as fathers or partners.
I think that's great. It's really important. I wanted to ask, because obviously your work is around cycles, and you've talked about how you were able to notice in the past the changes and pick up when things had shifted and put self-care in place. But I wondered whether you talk about sort of now later in life, are you still connecting to cycles in some way? Whether it's, you know, maybe, because I know some women start to connect more with the lunar cycle, and really can feel a shift in energy as they come towards the full moon, or are really managing their energy around the outer seasons. And do let themselves hunker down a bit in winter. So I'm just interested in how cycles are still affecting your work.
Sure. And me personally, I've always, because it's been, you know, I think it's been 11 years since I've had a period. So, you know, I don't have a menstrual cycle anymore. I am aware of the lunar cycle. I'm certainly aware of the seasonal cycle. And of course, they all impact in their own way. Sometimes I'm more aware of the lunar cycle 1 month to the next. But another little aspect of my biography is that I was very interested in astrology and I learnt astrology from 19, and I worked as an astrologer for, that was my career and income for about 10 years. Yeah. And so which is very much about cycles, about the big cosmic cycles. So in many ways, my whole life, I have worked with the awareness and sensitivity of the different phases of cycles. And one way I think about it now, if I'm explaining it to girls or to dads, I'll talk about the qualities of different cycles, but that even in an immediate sense, if we just, sit quietly for a moment, notice the in-breath and the out-breath as a cycle, as the cycle of breath, and notice that how different the in-breath will feel to the out-breath, how different the beginning of the in-breath will feel to the end of the in-breath, or the beginning of the out-breath to the end of the out-breath, and that there are all these different qualities going on at any time. So, and even just the pause between the in-breath and the out-breath, and at the other side too. So I think really so the long way around to answer your question is that having spent a lot of my life really, on one hand, intellectually thinking about these things, but also observing them in myself, it has helped me develop a sensitivity to what's going on for me, what I'm feeling, and what I need to do, and really a long time ago, having given myself permission to do that. Now, on a daily basis, we can't always do exactly what we feel like. I mean, this is one of the features of being an adult, is that we have, we learn delayed gratification. So sometimes I might be in the middle of something and feeling like, oh, it's time for me to rest now. And maybe I decide I'm just going to finish this task first, because that will suit me better later on. But in the big scheme of things, I think I've learnt you know, through years of having a menstrual cycle, through years of working with cycles in a number of different ways, I've learnt an awareness of where I am. So whether it's to do with the lunar cycle, whether it's to do with the seasonal cycle, and I do notice things about all of those. You know, it's like, oh, this feels like this. Oh, okay, this is what I need to do, or this is what I don't need to do, whatever, whichever the case.
Yeah, that permission is really important, isn't it? It's first the noticing, and then the permission to change what you're doing if you want to, if it feels appropriate. Yeah. I mean, what I've noticed is that you can get an amplification. So, for example, if you're in your inner summer, so you're coming up to ovulation and it's the full moon, so there's more sort of energy there, and it's the outer summer, the season of summer, whoosh, it really magnifies the effect. So I try to make people aware of that as well, because sometimes it can feel, when you have a natural cycle, that there are ups and downs, and they can be quite big up and downs. And again, just trying to understand why there's such a sort of shift can really help you feel that it's not a problem, like you were saying earlier. It's not the cycle that's the problem. It's you know, it can be other things that are going around, or a particular sort of health issue you've got. But I think the more you can understand the layers and the depth, the more you just realise how amazing we are, and how we can't be independent from the world, from everything that's happening around us. Yeah,
absolutely. And we have, you know, we all live in a certain observable cycle. So we're, you know, I mean, you and I are different parts of the world, but, you know, the people around you and the people around me, we're all aware of what season it is. We're all aware of what stage of the day that it is. And, you know, there are certain norms as to the sort of clothes you might wear in the middle of summer or in the middle of winter, or what activities you might be doing, you know, at 2 a.m. or at 2 p.m. So, you know, those are the things externally that we're, you know, we don't even question because we're all used to that. But when we have inner cycles, like the menstrual cycle, that's a personal cycle. And I think one of the keys for women and girls is to give that as much credibility, that that's as vital a cycle for them, even if other people outside them can't see that. You know, so it's up to us to be able to say, you know, I'm in my inner autumn, and this is what helps me at this time. You know, this is, if I'm not feeling 100%, this is the kind of thing that will help. It may not be as good for me, it may not be as useful for me in my inner spring, but it just takes time to develop that self-awareness. But it's giving value and respect to our inner cycles.
I think that's such an insight there, to give that weight and that value to what we can't always see or is different from what other people are experiencing. Thank you for that. I also wanted to ask you about whether you can pinpoint a transformative experience that you've had, and it might not be connected to cycles, but I'm always fascinated about sort of key moments in people's lives when something's changed. It might not always be at the time that you're aware of it. Sometimes it's when you look back and you realise, oh, that was a really pivotal moment. So I wonder if you could share something like that with us.
I really love this question, and I had a little teledex going through my head of different possibilities. But one that I really love, and I can't really say to what extent this has led on to other things, but I think it was a deep inner change. And back in the days when we could travel, I was on holiday in Fiji, and we were staying on a little island that had incredible coral reefs. And I went out with one of the people from the resort, and it was just one resort and one village on this island, and went out in a boat, and there was another man from Brazil, and we were out with our snorkeling gear. So I was snorkeling around, and it was all very beautiful, lots of little tropical fish and colourful coral and all diverse. And then I saw this most amazing creature, incredible creature. And it turned out it was a really large, probably quite mature, you know, I don't know how old they get, but octopus.
Oh.
And it was moving, and I watched it probably all up for about an hour, and it was moving in and around the different shapes of the corals, and it's so fluid in its body. And as it moves, it changes color, its skin color changes texture just really suddenly. And then it sort of has all these arms, and it sort of wiggles through. It's quite large altogether, but it can sort of move through little parts. And to me, it was so different than anything I knew. And it was so fascinating, and so, you know, had these most amazing sort of capacities. And I called over the other snorkeler to come and watch, and we both watched this for sort of quite some time. And I think what it really opened up in me is a really, you know, profound sort of joy and connection with nature. I mean, snorkeling is great anyway. I love snorkeling. But when that opened up for me, you know, thereafter, you know, it didn't have to be an amazing, you know, octopus doing its thing. It could be an ant or a bird or a leaf. You know, nature is just so beautiful and so amazing. So I do love in my life to make time to walk in nature and observe things and not be rushed, and just make that connection.
What an amazing experience. You described it so beautifully. I can just imagine the sort of fluid movements, and wonderful. I just came across a documentary about a gentleman, I think I'm right in saying he's based in South Africa, who's created a documentary. Have you seen this? About
I have, which made me remember my experience.
Yeah. About, yes, this relationship that he develops with the octopus, and it sort of teaches him lots about life. And I must admit I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really interested to watch it. Yeah.
Well, I highly recommend it. It is terrific. But he had this relationship over a year. You know, every day for a year he spent time with this octopus, which was truly amazing. But it did. So I didn't develop that kind of relationship in 1 hour. However, it felt very magical and quite mystical too. A very deep, connected feeling, being able to be there and participate in something so extraordinary.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I could talk to you for a long time, Jane. I'd like you to tell people a bit more about where they can find you. I know you have the Chalice Foundations. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about exactly what that does.
Yes, thank you. The Chalice Foundation I set up as a not-for-profit organisation that is involved in positive menstrual culture and menstrual education and well-being. So we're at the moment, this year we've been producing blogs every week, and on all kinds of different subjects. And it's the umbrella organisation for Celebration Day for Girls and for various educational initiatives, and it's still developing. So that can be found at chalicefoundation.org. And as part of that, we have an organisation that I began 20 years ago, actually 20 years last month, of a workshop called Celebration Day for Girls that you already mentioned. And so this is, I spend a lot of time with this, and we have our website is celebrationdayforgirls.com. So there's a lot of information on there about the program for girls and where facilitators are. And people can always contact us from there if they want to find out more.
Because I think I'm right in saying you're hoping to run them online because of what's happened in the world with the lockdown, and So even if at the moment there isn't currently a facilitator near the listener, they can potentially join an online session gathering soon.
Very soon. We're this month we're starting a pilot program, so we've kind of prepared the program. We're just running it through, maybe iron out some kinks. Of course, it's quite different doing things online, but it also can be a really sort of positive place to be with people if we can't be meeting in person, or if someone lives somewhere. Like in Australia, we have school students who join what we call School of the Air. So they live very remotely, and they will have a little schoolroom in their house, and they're meeting with their teacher and other students in their class who might live hundreds and hundreds of miles apart. So for instance, people like that could join Celebration Day for Girls.
Yeah, it's great. It's going to really open up accessibility, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jane, for talking to me. I really encourage people to go and look at those websites that she's talked about, because you also had another book that came out about bloody time. So for those people that actually maybe work in the field, I found it an amazing book. It's got statistics in there. It's got lots of quotations about people's experience. That's been a really interesting resource for me to use. So I'll point you in that direction as well.
Fantastic. I will give you another website then, so people to access that book and my other books. We don't have that set up on the Chalice Foundation website yet. And that is fertility.com.au. So that shop has my books.
Oh, perfect.
And we're happy to send them out anywhere in the world.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jane.
My absolute pleasure. Great to speak with you today, Tessa.
There we go.